Hello, and welcome to Cocktails with a Twist of History. We are dedicated to making your mixology adventures not only informative, but also entertaining. I want to angle off a little bit because last time we were talking about daiquiri, and the daiquiri is made with rum. And rum has a tremendous amount of history to it, so I want to talk a little bit about rum now. Now, rum is really fascinating to me because it's one of those things that doesn't have a lot of very fine definitions. It also doesn't have a lot of agencies that are overseeing it to making sure that they're done in a particular way. And so that gives way to a lot of variation in rum. And a lot of the different countries will produce rum slightly different depending upon where they're from. There are different kinds of styles of rum. You'll hear that there's a dark rum and a light rum, an aged rum and a non-aged rum. There's a white rum, a gold rum. So those are different categories, sort of, but even those aren't really very hard and fast rules. There are different types of styles. There's a Jamaican rum. The Jamaican rums are a little bit funky flavors. They are made with wild yeast, and therefore they are a little bit of a different kind of character. They have agricole rums, which are made from sugar cane juice instead of sugar or sugar molasses, and those have a little bit of a grassy flavor to them. Also very sweet, very nice, but a little bit different. There's the molasses-based rums. The molasses rums are very dark. I have a few of those. Those are some of my favorites. Very sweet, has a malty flavor to it, and those are really nice. The other things that affect the taste of rum are things that would also affect a whiskey. For example, what kind of oak barrels they're stored in, or what kind of finishing barrels, how long they've been stored in the barrels, what's the age, and things like that. Also, what proof is the rum? The rums tend to be 80 proof, most of them. There was a time when Bacardi was making this 151 proof rum, which was overproof. There was a big fire in their warehouse, and after that they stopped. There are a few companies that do make the 151 proof, or at least the overproof rums, where you can still get them. But the majority of the rums really are a standard 80 proof, which is interesting considering, like I said, it doesn't have that standard across the board rules like some of the other alcohols. Okay, rum itself is made from sugar byproducts or molasses. And what they do is they put the yeast into that and they distill that, which means that the rums tend to have a little bit of a sweeter flavor and a little bit of an interesting character that's very different from some of the other alcohols. They're aged in barrels, we said, and these barrels are usually aged in the tropical areas, in which case the heat from the tropical areas tends to affect the taste of the rum as well, differently than they would in the whiskey. Whiskeys that are aged in hotter areas act differently than the ones that are in colder areas. There are a bunch of different companies and a bunch of different countries that do make rum, and they all are very different. The sugar was produced a lot in the Caribbean, and that's because when Christopher Columbus came to the New World, his in-laws were sugar plantation owners in the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands are in the northern part of Africa, so he brought sugar plants with him, and they landed in the Caribbean area, and that's where they planted the sugar. Now, what they didn't realize was that the climate for sugar in the Caribbean was amazing, and so it really took off, and it became one of their big producers and one of their big products, and a lot of their income came from sugar from the different Caribbean islands. Now, by the 1600s, they started to produce rum as an export, as something that they would sell, not something that they would just drink themselves. In order to get sugar, you have to cook it And then there's a byproduct called molasses. And molasses, a lot of places would throw out. They didn't want to throw it out, so they produced it into rum. And that's what the original rums were. But by the 1600s, they were really producing it in a way that they could sell it. Mostly probably from Barbados, which is where it started. There's some people that will dispute that, but if you look through the legal documents at the time, that's probably where it started as a mass production and an export. Now, the British started to colonize further north in the New World, and the rum followed as well, and that went also to the New World. Also around this time, the pirates found rum, and they started to trade in rum. And we know that the pirates loved rum. They traded it, they drank it, why not? It's delicious. And there were all sorts of stories about the pirates and the rum. What's interesting was the biggest purchaser of rum for hundreds of years was actually the British Navy. The British Navy, they decided that they were going to have a rum ration. And in 1731, they actually codified this. And they said every sailor was going to get a half a pint of rum. At that point, it was really overproof rum. And this was a way to make it a little bit better for the sailors that were a long time out on the sea. Water on these ships really didn't last. It got bad. It went bad. Beer also, they tried. That went bad. Rum seemed to work. And so that was what they put on these ships. And they decided they were going to give it to the sailors. Now, in 1740, this guy named Admiral Edmund Vernon decided that he was going to water down the rum because he didn't want a bunch of drunk sailors on his fleet. And he put more water in it. He added lime and sugar to make it taste a little better. And if you caught that, rum, sugar, lime, that's like a daiquiri. They called it a grog because Admiral Vernon, he wore this coat that was called a grog that was, I guess, kind of a raincoat. And so they called it the grog, and that was what they gave out. Now, I've been talking way too long without a drink in my hand, so let's explore some rums. Okay, here we have a very interesting rum. And this is a company called Pompeo. It's actually from Venezuela, and it is a dark rum. It's a molasses rum. And if you smell, that is delicious. It has this character. It has this sweetness. Cheers. Oh, that is really nice. That is a really nice flavor. It definitely is different than a lot of the other hard alcohols. It is a different flavor category. And you can really tell that this is rum, not something else. Very, very nice. So we said that the sailors in the British Army were given the rum rations. They added the lime. What they found out also from the lime was that it provided the vitamin C that they needed, and it kept away scurvy. So you see, they had all sorts of benefits from it. Now, the little bit later, the British were trying to patrol the eastern coast of the New World. They knew that the rebels were starting to make trouble for them. And so they started to step up the patrols on the East Coast, which kept the rum from coming up the East Coast from the Caribbean. Now, around this time in the New World, they were starting to plant things like corn and rye, which were their own crops, and they started making bourbon from the corn, rye from the rye, and because it was a national pride and they couldn't get the rum, they started to drink more of the bourbon, more of the rye, which meant that rum really took a downturn in production, in popularity. A lot of the production really was going to the New World at that point, and here it was very hard to get it there. During Prohibition, they had a very similar problem. Prohibition, it was legal to make rum in the Caribbean, but it was illegal to ship it to the United States. It was illegal, but that didn't mean that they didn't. They had these things called rum runners, small boats that they would go up from the Caribbean into the United States to sell the rum so that the people could, still have a drink. And it was a lot of that. And, the ships came and they tried to stop them. The United States came and would seize various ones, and, but there was a lot of it that came up that way. Let's just explore one more rum. This one is called Dos Madres, 5+5. The 5+5, they call it that because it ages 5 years in an oak barrel in the Caribbean, and then another 5 years in Spain. They send it to Spain. And you can tell that it's another one of my favorite rums because it's almost gone. Yes. But let's take a look at it. Also very, very malty, very nice, dark. Cheers. Different than the other one. This, I can taste the sugar straight out, like a brown sugar kind of taste. Very, very nice though. Very good and a delicious, delicious rum. By the way, the British Royal Navy, we said, was giving out those rum rations. They started, we said, in 1731. They continued that all the way until July 31st, 1970, which is called Black Tot Day. A tot was the rations, when they decided that they would no longer give rations to the soldiers, to the sailors. And the reason was because the nuclear power was starting to be used on the warships, and there was a new invention called a breathalyzer. And they were afraid that the sailors would come off of the nuclear warship and get breathalyzed, and they say, hey, this guy is drunk. And that would be a really bad look for them. And so that was when they decided to stop the rations. Okay, so we're going to continue talking about rum, but for now, if you have a different story, if you have more information, if you have just a comment, please send it to us. We want to hear it. Send it to us in a comment, email it to us, or tell it to the bottle. We want to hear it. Also, don't forget, subscribe, like, put something in the comment. We want to know that you're out there. Thank you from Cocktails with a Twist of History.